everyone, Winter here with a new featured deck video. Today we're taking a closer look at the Russian Tarot of St. Petersburg. The credited artist is Yuri Shakov, and there's a pretty interesting story behind this artist, which I'll share in a moment. The deck was published in 1992. It was printed in Italy and distributed by US Games. Although it's a fairly old deck, it is still widely available and comes in a simple tuck box, just like this. There are already a couple of flip-through videos about this deck on YouTube, so I'm not going to show in detail and discuss each and every card today. I mean, you might end up seeing each and every card, but it will be most of them in passing, just so you get a visual feel for the deck. I really just want to share a little about the artist and the amazing artwork, particularly a little bit about the process that's involved with a deck that's created in this unique manner. The deck is one of a kind. It has a very interesting backstory, and I think it tends to fall into that underrated or overlooked deck category, which is why I felt compelled to make this video. So let's get started. So I really just want to focus primarily on the artist and the art in this deck, with a couple of artistic details that I think are worth noting. So let's talk about the artist. Yuri Shakov was a Russian painter born in the 1930s who studied in both Moscow and Palek, training in the unique tradition of miniature painting. So I don't think I've said this on this channel before, but I adore anything miniature. Everything tiny is extra awesome. The more tiny it is, the better. His work achieved the highest levels of accomplishment and can be found in many private collections as well as museums today. At some point in the 1980s, and I'm a little fuzzy on exactly when, there's not a lot of information about this artist available, the Soviet government allowed Shakov and his family to leave Russia and to come to America. He had other relatives living here, but that was pretty much the extent of his support system. So the Russian government did not allow him to take any of his artwork except for a single portrait of his wife. He found himself starting all over again in a foreign land with virtually nothing. And as difficult as that must have been, it wasn't long before he became known as one of the greatest miniature painters of the 20th century. The Russian Tarot of St. Petersburg was Yuri Shakov's final commissioned work. Sadly, he died in 1989 before he could see its completion. So he did sketch the designs for each and every one of the 78 cards, and he painted many of them, but the remainder were painted by another Russian artist who was trained in that same Palek style. The identity of this second artist is a mystery. He worked in secrecy through a broker, like a third-party agent from Russia who was dealing with the publishing company. And he did so because this was a tumultuous period in communist Russia, and artists and virtually everyone didn't feel safe to be dealing with the West in all kinds of matters. The second artist relied on Shakov's notes and sketches, along with a copy of the Universal Rider-Waite deck. Now, we're not 100% sure it was the Universal version, but we do know that the second artist had a Rider-Waite deck at his disposal. So I'm just showing you now how the major arcana heavily relies upon Rider-Waite-Smith, but of course you'll see it being shown through that kind of pre-industrialization Russian lens. It's a romanticized view for sure, but 90% of tarot and oracle decks are romanticized anyway, so that shouldn't surprise anyone. So I'll finish showing the major arcana, I guess. And then we'll just talk for a second. It's easy to fall in love with this deck. If for no other reason, then it's a beautiful, vivid combination of Russian cultural heritage and the symbolic imagery of the tarot. However, when you consider the amazing process of miniature painting and the lengths that the artist went to in order to create this deck, your appreciation will certainly deepen. A lot of times, we talk about kind of superficially the appearance of art, and specifically when it comes to decks, oracle decks, tarot decks, Lenormand decks. But that process, the unique process, depending on the methods and the style of the artist and even the time period, it matters. I think it matters, and it deserves a little more energy. So it's really one of my primary motivations today. Gorgeous. So anyone who's comfortable with Rider-Waite Smith can work with this deck regardless. That is one of my favorite all-time devil cards. I love it. I think he's trying to hint that he came out, like recently, it looks like a guy that came out of like the Russian joint with the tattoos, but I have to say from what I've seen, Russian prison tattoos are usually much better. But that guy was buff. All right. Just gorgeous. The camera's not doing a bad job. However, it's not fully capturing the beauty of these cards. Beautiful moon card. It's always one of my favorite cards. Okay, this is not supposed to be a review, so I'm going to withhold my opinion here. But this is the only card I don't adore. It's the Sun. And as far as the side-by-side Rider-Waite Smith comparison, I'll end it with the major arcana here with the World. I won't do it with every single card, but you get the idea. A lot of people are curious about that. Palek is one of 4 Russian settlements known for its miniature painting. For centuries, the artists of Palek painted Russian Orthodox icons for churches and private homes. In the early 20th century, the artists began painting miniature works of art onto small lacquered papier-mâché boxes. They painted scenes of Russian daily life, folklore, fairy tales, and literature. Palek lacquered boxes are still popular today, and they are highly collectible. So they vary greatly in price. You can obtain a small one for under $100, maybe a little over $100, that was made in the traditional manner. And there are tons of knockoffs. So the box I just showed you is indeed a knockoff, and it is from Russia, but they skipped a very important step in the traditional process, and it is actually a print of a Palek original that has been applied to the top of the box instead of hand painted by an individual artist. Russian miniaturists use tempera paint, as they always have, and they achieve incredibly bold shades of color. My particular favorite color that you'll see in the deck is one of the darkest shades of green. This one's not capturing it. This is not quite the right shade, but I notice it's unique to Palek, and it is so vibrant. My husband actually looked at it and he said, they're almost there with this one. He said it was psychedelic. So look for the plant life and the tree leaves when I show you images of the deck, and you'll spot that beautiful green color. I have never seen it in another tarot deck. Honestly, I have not seen that shade of green. So the small scale of the paintings requires great skill and precision. Artists use magnifying glasses to see the detail, and sometimes they find themselves creating lines so fine that they are required to use a paintbrush made of only one single hair. They also rest their arms in special braces to steady their hands enough. Yuri Shakov relied on these same traditional techniques to create the paintings for this tarot deck. In fact, each tarot card was painted to exact size. So when you hold a card in your hands, you are holding the exact size of its original painting. Can you imagine? Shakov knew nothing about tarot when U.S. Games approached him, so it took him several months for him to decide to undertake this enormous job. He studied 3 decks in particular quite closely, and you will see their influences in the deck. The Classic Tarot, the Rider-Waite-Smith, which no one was saying Rider-Waite-Smith back then, I believe, and the Marseille, or I should say a Marseille. I'm not exactly sure which version. I personally find it to be an absolute joy to read with, because it's exotic and unusual enough in appearance. Apologies for the glare. There you go. And it's visually exciting because it seems, a little foreign. Now, this is coming from my American perspective. Yet it is familiar enough to be comfortable and clear and easy to read. And it is still true to the traditional structure, and most heavily, it reeks of Rider-Waite. And that's great for me. Most people, I think, learn on Rider-Waite, and so it's one of those decks you can pick up and use immediately. Cynthia Giles wrote about Shakov's process in a book about the deck by the same name. The book is the same name as the title of the deck. And she noted that unlike many other deck creators, Shakov had absolutely no preconceived notions or agendas for this deck. He was not trying to tell the world what he thought cards meant. He simply translated the imagery through his own unique lens. And the result is this highly intuitive series of very clean compositions. He loved his work and devoted the last 2 years of his life to the deck, creating the master designs for the entire deck and completing paintings for nearly half of the cards. According to his family, he often happily worked 16 hours a day on the art. So the cards, as you can see, and again, the colors, they're beautiful. The video, it's not too bad, but I wish you could see it in person. So they're visually striking. They have a deep black background and a slick finish designed to emulate the shiny black lacquer boxes of the Russian miniature tradition. They're framed in gold, and it's one of the few borders on a tarot deck that does not bother me at all. Intricate gold decorative motifs embellish each card, which is also reminiscent of those lacquer boxes. The backs of the cards feature an ornate, old-world Russian version of a coin, and I know it looks like a shield. I'm sure that's no happy accident. A cup, a sword, and a club, and a period helmet tops the image. All of the images float within an oval shape that I'm sure must be inspired by the beloved Easter egg tradition of Russia. They call it Pascha, so Orthodox refer to Easter as Pascha rather than Easter. And of course, the roots of egg symbolism can surely be traced back to pre-Christian, Slavic, seasonal practices. The artist is drawing on Christian Russian tradition here, though, I have no doubt. I find this idea of a small treasury of imagery that is contained within the egg shape to be reminiscent of Russia's famous Fabergé eggs. You've probably seen Fabergé eggs, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They feature that ornate, precious metalwork on the outside and beautiful symbolic jeweled creations on the inside. So you can see we have this ornate egg on the outside and then this beautiful, even more impressive gift on the inside. And it is a kind of gift. And that is how the Fabergé eggs began, as a gift. from the czar to the czarina, right? The notion of a small work of art that is housed within an even smaller, or that is housing, I should say, an even smaller work of art also might remind you of like a Russian nesting doll. And the actual name for those is escaping me right now. And the idea of that actually has Asian roots, but Russia really became known for them and they're beloved, and the nesting dolls kind of have this same concept behind them. So maybe it's not just me. I think Russia also loves tiny things and tiny things within small things. So the art transforms the oval shape that we talked about into an implied 3D egg shape in some of the cards, like this one, the Five of Clubs, in which the figures are arranged in this oval and they actually seem to conform to the shape of the egg. Their cloaks are blowing in such a way that they seem to fill the space of a spherical kind of egg. It's an implied sphere. It's like that, the fourth wall that you're not supposed to break, that invisible wall between us and this scene and the card. But I'm not sure if you can quite gauge it. When you're looking at the card in person, you can, that the cloaks are filling this kind of implied egg wall between us and the scene. So it's not just an oval, a flat oval. Sometimes the three-dimensionality of an actual egg shape is obviously implied. So all of the cards feature scenes of old world Russia and romanticized images of people who are colorfully dressed in traditional Slavic clothing with intense colors and sometimes busy patterns. An example of the role that folklore plays in the deck can be seen in cards like the Ace of Coins and the Hanged Man, as you can see here. So both cards include a firebird. Russian folklore portrays the firebird, which you might be imagining is like a phoenix, as sometimes being a sign of a blessing and other times being more an omen of doom. One well-known story tells of a firebird that keeps flying into a czar's orchard, and it's eating his golden apples. He's not happy about it. So he sent his sons to capture it. One son actually grabbed hold of the bird, but it escaped his grasp, leaving behind only a single feather. That feather was bright enough to light up an entire palace room. You can see here that the Hanged Man is suspended from not just any old tree, but an apple tree. And that is clearly alluding to this fairy tale. Just above him is a firebird. It's also worth noting that the firebird is featured on the flag of Palek. So I think I'm going to wrap things up here. I could definitely whip out more cards and we could obsess about all of the folklore behind it and the beauty, but this gives a really good idea. And I want to stop here because that way I'll know that most of the video was devoted to the artist and the art, which was kind of the goal. Thanks for joining me, and I'm so happy you were here to help me give this beautiful deck some much deserved love. Take care.